When I reached out to the office of Representative Seth Moulton, I was put in touch with scheduler assistant Gaya Gupta, who sent me this written statement from Representative Moulton. Like every American, I am devastated and infuriated by the constant barrage of gun violence in America. I read the news of another 18 murdered with a heavy heart, and I have been deeply disturbed in the days since by reports that the police knew about the shooter's threats of violence and did not act. I appreciate you reaching out to me in the wake of this terrible attack. I share your belief that if we truly want to honor the lives of those we lost, Congress must take meaningful action to prevent another tragedy. Right now, Congress isn't doing enough, not even close. A decade after the Sandy Hook massacre, gun violence is now the #1 cause of child death in the U.S. Every day, more than 110 people are killed by guns. This uniquely American epidemic of gun violence is directly tied to government inaction on gun laws. For years now, I have co-sponsored the assault weapons ban, which would make it a crime to import, sell, manufacture, transfer, or possess a semi-automatic assault weapon or large-capacity ammunition-feeding device. This bill passed the House last year under a Democratic majority, but it got stuck in the Senate because of Republican opposition and the existence of the filibuster. I am as frustrated as you that, after all these senseless deaths, we still cannot pass this basic legislation. American lives, children's lives, are depending on it. I will continue to support this legislation wherever and however I can as I work to convince my Republican colleagues to have the political courage to do what most of them know is right. Beyond an assault weapons ban, I would also like to share what other legislation I have backed in Congress. First, we need violent history checks on every gun sale, which is supported by 86% of gun owners. In the 117th Congress, I was a co-sponsor of H.R. 8, a bill that would close loopholes in gun purchases and require violent history checks for all gun sales. The bill passed the House, but languished in the Senate for over a year. In that time, tens of thousands of people were killed by guns in America. This Congress, I am an original co-sponsor of the Enhanced Background Checks Act, which revises the amount of time a licensed gun dealer has to perform a background check from 3 days to 10 days, and the Federal Firearm Licensee Act. This bill would, among other provisions, expand federal firearms licensee laws to facilitators of firearm sales, like sellers at gun shows and online marketplaces, which are currently exempt from background check requirements and other federal regulations. In addition to background checks, we must consider other ways to keep guns and ammunition out of the hands of people who are likely to misuse them. To that end, I co-sponsored the Disarm Hate Act, which would bar people convicted of a misdemeanor hate crime from buying or otherwise receiving guns. I also co-sponsor Ethan's Law, which would create federal standards for the safe storage of firearms. More than 75% of firearms used in youth suicide attempts or accidental firearm injuries come from the homes of family or close friends. To protect our children, we must ensure that they cannot access guns unsupervised. Moreover, I am an original co-sponsor of the Stop Online Ammunition Sales Act, which would require federally licensed ammunition dealers to confirm the identity of individuals purchasing ammunition online via photo ID and require ammunition vendors to report any sales of more than 1,000 rounds within 5 consecutive days to the U.S. Attorney General. In June of 2022, the House voted to pass the Protecting Our Kids Act, of which I was a co-sponsor. This legislation would raise the minimum age for sales of certain semi-automatic guns from 18 to 21, set federal requirements for firearm storage, and ban the sale of large-capacity magazines. We also passed a bill to create a federal extreme risk protection order law. ERPOs allow courts to temporarily remove firearms from someone declared by a judge based on evidence presented by multiple parties and testimony from the defendant, to be an imminent threat to personal or public safety. In the months leading up to a mass shooting, 80% of perpetrators are in noticeable crisis and 44% leak plans of their attack. Law enforcement must be allowed to act on these warning signs to prevent shootings from occurring. Once again, the Senate failed to act on these bills. Frustrating as that is, we did take a critical step forward with the passage of the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was signed into law on June 25, 2022. This legislation allocates $750 million of funding to be given to states for the creation and administration of mental health courts, drug courts, veterans courts, extreme risk protection orders, and legislation aiming to keep firearms out of the hands of people who are dangers to themselves or others. Adds convicted domestic violence abusers in dating relationships to the National Instant Criminal Background Check system, and creates a process for removal from NICS 5 years after the completion of the sentence if no other prohibited crimes are committed. Cracks down on gun dealers who illegally evade licensing requirements and clarifies which sellers need to register, conduct background checks, and keep appropriate records. Requires an investigative period of up to 10 days to review juvenile and mental health records, including checks with state databases and local law enforcement for buyers under 21 years of age. Creates federal straw purchasing and trafficking criminal offenses, allowing prosecutors to target dangerous illegal gun runners. Provides $250 million in funding for community and school-based violence prevention and mental health initiatives. Though this is good news, we still obviously have a ways to go if we want to end the epidemic of gun violence. That is why, in addition to supporting the bills outlined above, I also introduced the Mass Shooter Prosecution Act in July 2022 and have reintroduced it again this year. Mass shootings are nothing short of terrorism. The media, the general public, even the president call them that. But we don't currently prosecute mass shootings like the terrorist attacks they are because there are no legal grounds to do so. To rectify this issue, the MSPA would create a new terror statute that would make mass shootings a prosecutable terrorist offense. It would also enable law enforcement to carry out a comprehensive investigation of a mass shooters network in the wake of a shooting and give them the authority to prosecute individuals who knowingly provided material support to the mass shooter. This measure would give law enforcement the tools necessary to prevent future violence by uncovering terrorist networks before they have time to plan their next attack. Further, the bill stipulates that a mass shooting is an act of terrorism only if it results in at least 3 fatalities and if the shooter uses a semi-automatic rifle or fully automatic weapon. These and other measures would ensure that the statute is not misused by law enforcement to target historically overpoliced communities. The mass shooters in Buffalo, Uvalde, Nashville, and Lewiston won't be tried as terrorists despite taking dozens of innocent lives. If passed, the MSPA would ensure that the next mass shooter will be. Lastly, I requested significant funding for gun violence prevention and research through the fiscal year 2024 appropriations process. This included $60 million for gun violence research, $200 million for the Community Violence Intervention and Prevention Initiative, and $250 million for the CDC Community and Youth Violence Prevention Program. I also requested that the appropriations bill make Victims of Crime Act funding available for gun violence victim services programs. Gun violence is undeniably a public health crisis. We need to come together to finally achieve meaningful solutions, not just share platitudes of thoughts and prayers. Thank you again for writing to me about the assault weapons ban. I hear your fear and your anger, and I am fully committed to making this ban a reality.